Hi, I'm Bob Aiken. I've been a hardware retailer most of my life, and for over 20 years I've been training people who work in hardware stores, home centers, and lumber yards on ways to sell electrical supplies. The team that brings you the Do It Best training break has asked me to talk to you this month about different types of receptacles you carry in your store's electrical department. So in the next few minutes, we'll look at how to tell one type of receptacle from another and how each one is correctly used, and how to help your customers select the correct ones for their projects. At first glance, it might appear that receptacles are pretty simple, since they don't look too intimidating. But like a lot of other items you sell, there's a lot more to receptacles than meets the eye. So with that in mind, let's begin by looking at some common household receptacles. Receptacles are available in different shapes, voltages, and amperages, and there are different types for specific purposes. Here we have the three most common types of receptacles: duplex, single, and combination. The one you see most often is the duplex receptacle. Duplex receptacles have two outlets, so your customers can plug two items into them. This is the kind of receptacle that most of your customers will need, unless they need to plug in certain types of appliances, as we'll see next. The National Electric Code, also known as the NEC, states that a fixed appliance, that is a larger appliance that's installed in one location and not moved, must not share a circuit with any other items. A code, in case you're not familiar with the term, is a legal requirement for building construction. Some examples of fixed appliances include stoves, clothes dryers, and air conditioners. These items should be installed with single outlet receptacles similar to this type. A single outlet receptacle is a logical choice for this purpose because there's only one outlet. This prevents your customers from plugging in additional items and unwittingly overloading the circuit. Sometimes you may encounter customers who want to have a receptacle and a switch installed in the same location. For example, they might want to install a switch to control a light and also have a receptacle available in the same single box. For these customers, recommend this item, which is called a combination device. That's an overview of the three common receptacle types. Now you need to be able to recognize the different voltages that these receptacles come in. I'll show you an easy way to tell. Your two basic types are 125 volt and 250 volt rated receptacles. If you hold a receptacle with the ground hole down and the slot on the right is horizontal, then the device is rated to carry 250 volts. But if the right slot is vertical, it's rated at 125 volts. It's just as easy to identify receptacle amperage ratings. Most household receptacles are either 15 amp or 20 amp rated to be used in common 15 and 20 amp circuits. We'll get into some different special use receptacles in a minute. You can put a 15 amp receptacle on a 12 gauge 20 amp circuit, but you cannot put a 20 amp receptacle on a 14 gauge 15 amp circuit. If you were to install a receptacle with a higher amp rating into a lower amp circuit, the circuit could be overloaded and a fire could result. Now, a moment ago, you heard me reference 12 and 14 gauge wires. Let me explain what that means. Wires are measured by their diameter. The word gauge refers to the diameter of the wire. Strange as it may seem, the larger the number, the smaller the gauge of the wire. A 14 gauge wire only has a 15 amp capacity, whereas a 12 gauge wire has a 20 amp capacity. Here's how to tell the difference between a 15 amp receptacle and a 20 amp receptacle. Hold a receptacle like this, as I did before. Then look at the upper left slot. If it's the same as the right slot, except for length, which doesn't make a difference, the receptacle was designed to allow each plugged-in item to draw a maximum of 15 amps. But if the upper left slot is T-shaped, the receptacle is rated to carry 20 amps from each outlet. An easy way to remember this is to think of T for 20. We've just seen the three most common types of receptacles, as well as how to determine the voltages and amperage of these receptacles. Now let's briefly discuss receptacle quality. In some instances, it's okay to use less expensive promotional grade receptacles, but in other situations it's important to use more expensive types. The lowest price receptacle is known as a general purpose receptacle. It's designed to be placed in areas where you don't expect to repeatedly plug and unplug things. For example, a customer may plug lamps, a TV, a radio, and other miscellaneous items into their bedroom and living room receptacles. Most of these are probably not going to be moved around much. Because the items are left in place, the contacts in the slots don't get much wear. This means there isn't a great deal of stress placed on the receptacle, so a general purpose receptacle is suitable. Now contrast this with the activity that commonly goes on in your customers' kitchens, bathrooms, and workshops. In these areas, items are repeatedly plugged in and unplugged. For example, you have hand mixers, blenders, toasters, and popcorn poppers in the kitchen, hair dryers and curling irons in the bathroom, and all sorts of power tools in the workshop. This kind of use calls for heavy-duty receptacles. These are commonly available in 20-amp designs. A heavy-duty receptacle has a metal strap on the back to help reinforce against the pressure that's applied while plugging and unplugging items. Too much stress can break the plastic of a general-purpose receptacle. This reinforced heavy-duty device will last much longer. Here's another hidden feature on heavy-duty receptacles, and that's the plastic body. Heavy-duty receptacles are constructed from high-temperature Bakelite plastic to withstand the extra heat generated when current is drawn from the receptacle. Heat tends to make ordinary plastic brittle, so high-temperature Bakelite is a very good feature to have when a customer expects to use the receptacle a lot. So to review, there are two situations when it's good to recommend that a customer purchase a heavy-duty receptacle. The first is when a customer expects to plug things into the receptacle often. The second is when a customer expects to draw a fair amount of current from the device. For example, if a customer wants to plug in a toaster, a coffee maker, or a broiler oven, they should definitely purchase a heavy-duty receptacle. Some receptacles have interesting features built into them that customers are often not aware of. For example, examining this common receptacle, you can see that on the back of it, there's a measuring gauge opposite the grounding screw. This gauge shows you the exact amount of insulation you should remove from the wire so that it will either fit into the holes on the back or properly bend around the screws without any bare wire sticking past the back of the device. Removing too much insulation, which is against code, can lead to a short circuit, and that can start a fire. Also notice the small hooks on the back of the receptacle next to the screws. These hooks provide you with a clever way to help the customer bend the wire into a loop to fit perfectly around the screw without using a tool, like so. Here's another interesting fact about receptacles that your customers may not know. Occasionally you'll hear a customer complain that an electrician installed their receptacles upside down. Actually, upside down is now considered right side up. Electricians are taught that if the ground prong is on the top and not inserted all the way into the receptacle, there's less chance of accidentally crossing a metal object across two flat blades. That would cause a short circuit and could lead to electrocution. For those of you who still have doubts, look closely at a new receptacle and read the markings on the metal strap. In some brands, you'll notice you're holding the receptacle with the ground hole on top when you can read the writing on the strap. Manufacturers have started to modify receptacles in this way to reflect the new methods of installation. Now let's look at some common specialty receptacles. A GFCI stands for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupter. It's a specialty receptacle that helps protect against electrocution. We covered GFCI receptacles in detail back in volume 71 of the Do It Best training break. These are range receptacles, and these are dryer receptacles. They look very much alike, but they're really very different, so you should understand the difference. First of all, it's important to know that range and dryer receptacles come in both 3-wire and 4-wire configurations. According to the National Electric Code, all new and remodeled circuits should be installed with a separate grounding wire in the cable. This requires a 4-wire receptacle. Not all local codes have adopted this rule, but most of the US is this way. So if someone has a 3-wire type, they likely have an older circuit cable that has only 3 wires and no ground. Here's what the slots mean on a 3-wire receptacle. If the middle slot is L-shaped, this signifies a 30 amp rated device. That's what you need for a dryer, so this is a dryer receptacle. But if the middle slot is straight, it's rated to carry 50 amps. That's for an electric range, so here we have a range receptacle. The 2 angled or straight slots on both devices stand for 125 volts each, so the device is rated to carry 250 volts. Both rangers and dryers usually require a 250 volt rated device. On 4-wire 250 volt receptacles for rangers and dryers, the middle slot is for a neutral wire. If the middle slot is L-shaped, the device is rated for 30 amps, or a dryer. If it's straight, it's rated for 50 amps, and that would be a range. The 2 straight slots on the outside indicate 125 volt maximum for each slot, thus you have a 250 volt rated receptacle. The half-round slot on a 30 and a 50 amp rated device is for a separate grounding wire from the panel to the appliance. Now at some point you may encounter a customer with a range or dryer that will not plug into the receptacle in their house. Frequently customers in this situation will ask you for an adapter. There is no such thing. For safety reasons you must always match the range or dryer cord, which by the way is often called a pigtail, directly to the receptacle. To do otherwise is to risk fire or electrocution. When a customer has this problem, recommend that they contact an electrician to get it fixed. And speaking of adapters, the most common adapter mistake I have ever seen tends to occur right before Christmas, when customers will ask you for this. I call it the Christmas adapter. Customers stringing Christmas lights frequently end up with 2 female ends of their light strands facing each other, and they want to connect them together. These adapters are not manufactured by vendors because they're very dangerous. You should never in any way encourage a customer to make one. Explain to the customer that if they plug one end in, the other end will have a live prong that could electrocute them. Remember, if a customer is ever unsure about their ability to conduct any kind of electrical repair, it's wise to recommend that they consult an experienced electrician. By now, you might be thinking that receptacles are pretty complex. And it's true, they're not as simple as they seem at first glance. But with this training under your belt, understanding the most common types of receptacles and their uses will be a lot easier. Now you'll be much better able to help your customers make the best and safest choices for their needs.